Cool. And so super excited to have you on the podcast, Seth. Um, for everybody tuning in, they may not know who you are. So why don't you give us a quick rundown of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, awesome. Thank you all so much for having me. It's super great to connect. So my name is Seth Maxwell. I'm 34. I live in LA, and I lead Thirst Project. I serve as our founder there and our founder and CEO now of Legacy Youth Leadership.
Awesome.
That's so awesome. And we had the opportunity to meet you. How long ago was that? Maybe like a
Golly,
month,
maybe a month ago.
month and a half ago.
About
You
a
were in
month.
town. Yeah, just teaching us about the Thirst Project and just giving us tons of good information on that. That was super cool and very eye opening too. Yeah, I think one of the things that's really
Yeah.
awesome about the Thirst Project is how much I don't think maybe common people don't know about the water crisis.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, so I've been working in the space for about 13 years, and we've seen incredible progress and traction. But even still, it is, to your point, amazing how few people actually still know, given how massive in scale the water crisis is. So there's still over about 700 million people in the world who just don't have access to basic, safe, clean drinking water, which is kind of staggering.
Yeah. I mean, you told us a little bit about how you got started with Thirst Project, like how you started it up. Can you tell everyone, like the origins of it, like when you started it and kind of what fueled that idea for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was 19, living in Los Angeles, and I had a friend who was a photojournalist, and she was sent on an assignment for about a year and a half, where she lived in 6 week sort of blocks at a time, moving to different communities or villages all across Southeast Asia, South and Central America, all across the continent of Africa. And specifically, her job was to document and report on the progress that was being made on the UN's Millennial Development Goals, which, if you're not super familiar, at the turn of the millennium, the UN as a body sort of stepped back and said, hey, what is it that we as a global community need to do to eradicate extreme poverty, being people living on $1.25 a day or less, right? And so they developed these 15 goals, chief among them being access to water, sanitation, hygiene, amongst other things like access to education, food security, land tenure, et cetera. And so my friend was living in these different communities where a lot of work was being done by different groups and agencies trying to tackle these goals. And when she came back after being gone for a year and a half, we sat down together to catch up over coffee. And I sat across from her stunned for about 45 minutes as I watched, looking at just picture after picture after picture of incredible things. But it wasn't just, poverty porn, like, oh, look at this sad kid. But the stories that she told were, no, like, this is Sophie. She's 7. We hung out for 6 weeks. We played together. I watched her drink from this contaminated water source. I watched her contract cholera and suffer. And what was interesting was the common through line her and her team kept finding was, we're trying to attempt to bridge the education inequality gap by building schools and outfitting them with teachers. But yet you can't really bring education to a community successfully if all of your kids in a village are out walking sometimes 6 or 7 hours each day just to collect dirty water. So if you care about education, turned out you really cared about water. Similarly, hunger. We were trying to develop agricultural initiatives and combat food insecurity, but you can't do that without water. So turns out if you care about hunger, you care about water. And the intersectionality of this amongst all these different issues was super interesting because I, again, like most people, was 19, pretty decently well educated, but I'd never heard of this issue. And at that point, 13 years ago, 1.1 billion people in the world just didn't have access to basic, safe, clean drinking water. And again, I was just struck by how massive in scale this issue was, also how solvable it was, and the fact that I had never heard about it. And so I kind of couldn't stop thinking about it and went to class, started researching on my own, started having conversations with my friends. I was in college at the time. And, when you're 19 and you're passionate about something, you start a club. And so I was like, to all my friends, I was like, you have no idea what's going on in the world. Like, we have to do something. And so we just started trying to do events around town in LA to raise awareness of this issue. And so that was really how the organization was born, was out of this group of, college students who began just trying to force people to look at this issue and talk about it and see where it would go. Initially, we didn't imagine that we would start an organization, but the snowball effect was pretty incredible as we started just having those really meaningful conversations and talking to people, largely in our peer group at schools about it. So
yeah, that's so awesome. Yeah, I think whenever you came and talked to us, it was really like monumental for us to hear everything, because I mean, like you said, like a lot of people don't really know about the water crisis, and to be honest, I didn't until starting to work here and seeing like the water is a human rights trap, and that made me kind of start thinking about it. And then whenever you came in and talked to us about the impact that Thirst Project and Zox are making together, it's kind of mind-blowing. It's incredible to see how far we've come in, what was it, like 13 years or something like that. Yeah, like that's insane. So thank you for what you're doing. Like, that's awesome.
No, I mean, honestly, this is not like lip service. Thank you guys, because Zox is, a tremendous partner of Thirst and now Legacy. And, the work we've been able to do with young people and working to end the water crisis is pretty incredible. And it doesn't, we are impacting the lives of, quite literally hundreds of thousands of people all of the time. And that just doesn't happen without a huge amount of support. So.
Awesome. Well, like in that same vein, like how did you get started with Zox? Like how did you meet the bros, and how did the partnership start up?
Yeah, so it's funny, in the nonprofit space, right? There's always different components to the work you're doing, from actual program and project and impact work to a lot of fundraising. And it was honestly kind of the Cinderella story. Like there've been a handful of times where people have approached us versus us going and like pitching, hey, will you please give us money because we're doing good work? And I don't know that I've ever framed this exactly this way to the bros, but it was funny because I literally remember having conversations with our staff. We just got an email, like a random email. I think it was from Brandon, that was like, hey, Zox was pretty new at the time. It was pretty young and very nascent. And so they said, hey, we're starting this company. We're going to sell wristbands, and we want to give 10% of our profits to build water projects with you. Can we do a partnership? And we're like, yeah, of course. We get a lot of emails from people who are sort of just starting out with companies or brands they want to start, having similar conversations. And so we just have a kind of pretty standard licensing agreement that says, hey, you're allowed to use our name and our logo and our images to tell your customers that you're going to give a portion of what you say to us. And, here's the permission to do so. But admittedly, like when we signed the licensing agreement, I was like, oh, wow, wristbands, like, that's never been done before. And so I was like, whatever, they'll probably raise a couple $100. Yeah, give them a licensing agreement. And then like the first month came by and I was like, oh, wow, like, okay, wow, like that's a pretty good donation. And then like over like the next 3 or 4 months, I was like, wait, who are these guys? And then I emailed and I was like, hey, I think after like 3 or 4 months, I was like, hey, like we should meet. Like I'd love to like know who you are and like what, and basically see what your goals are as you are trying to support this initiative, and see how we can be good partners and good stewards of your resources in that way. And so we had them come by the office and meet our team, and we met them and kind of shared visions for where we wanted to go, what we wanted to do. But it was literally like the Cinderella story we talk about in the nonprofit space is like, oh, you don't pitch a brand comes to you, which is super flattering and really great, and kind of affirming of the work that you've built. But yeah, they pitched us, and admittedly I was like, oh, whatever, like they're not going to raise that much money, and you are one of our largest partners now. So
that's so awesome. Yeah, I never heard that story, and I've always been curious about like how you guys got connected, because I know that you and Brandon are like pretty good friends now, so that's so cool to see how like,
he's like one of my best friends now. Yeah,
that's so awesome. I love that. Well, do you want to go ahead and
yeah.
So one of the questions I had was when you guys were working on water as a human rights trap, what was the message that you were trying to convey to others who were looking at the strap, and what were you trying to go for basically?
Yeah. It's interesting working on a project for as long as we have, which 13 years, right? We've tried to find new ways to communicate the urgency of the issue, why it matters, why people should give. We talk a lot on our side of the work that we do about bridging what we call the empathy gap. Because for so many people, particularly, in the United States, although I know a lot of your customers are not just US based, right? So many people, thankfully, will never know what it is like to not have clean water. For majority of people, from the time you're born, you wake up and your parents, your people in your own home can open a bottle, turn on the tap, water safe, clean water is readily available all the time. And so the idea of what it is like to not only have to walk really long distances to collect water, also dirty water, and then the impact of what will happen from drinking that water, getting sick, potentially dying. Most people have no idea what that looks like or what that feels like, again, thankfully. And so, for us, the interesting thing too, as we've worked with so many different groups, I think the thing I love about the water crisis in particular, it's not a religious issue. It's not a political issue. I think everyone inherently understands everybody deserves access to safe water. Water really is a human right? It's not about where you live. This is not we don't work in the countries that we work in because of some, they seem so exotic or certain. It's like, no, we look at waterborne disease rates, waterborne mortality rates, where there's the greatest need. And because it is a human issue, we work where there are humans without safe water. And so I think people have really resonated with that idea that like water is a human right. And we want people to join in on that fight. And so the hope was that we could create a strap and a message that succinctly and effectively communicated what that was all about. And I think it's definitely done that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. It's a very agreeable message too. Water is a human right. So it's hard to hear about people that just don't have access to that basic human right. Like you were saying, like that's how you grow food is from clean water, and like everything kind of stems from that.
Yeah.
So I also wanted to know what would you say the most rewarding part of the Thirst Project is? Like, as this is like a personal question, like the growth that you guys have gone through, what do you think do you identify with the most?
Yeah, it's that's a really good question, because for me, I don't take for granted the work that we get to do, and how I have so many friends who either hate their jobs or work in spaces that aren't necessarily fulfilling, and so it's hard to pinpoint like one thing that is the most fulfilling about the work that we do, because it really is like it's pretty transformational. When you bring safe water to a community, you see disease rates drop consistently. You see mortality rates drop consistently. Access to education, right? People who, again, used to have to walk for hours don't have to, and take that time and go to school or get an education. And so I think at this point, we've built well over 3,000 projects. About 600 of those are, pretty significant, like wells, deep borehole wells that produce water that's sufficient to meet an entire village or community's needs really regularly. And so we're talking about about 500,000 people. And I think each one of those communities, each one of those projects, there are stories behind them of people who live in those spaces who that's their lives. And so we've been super fortunate to be able to meet and work with super closely so many of those people. And I think I don't have just like one story or one person, but I will say it was really cool. A few years ago, probably 5 years ago now, I got to take my mom and my stepdad into the field. And, I think it's important, for context, when we tell the story of the work that we do, I think a lot of people, particularly Westerners, imagine like what the Thirst Project is like, oh, like you guys like go to a place and like drill a well. And I'm like, look, I don't know how I appeared to you, but like my unskilled like manual labor in the field is like not what people in developing countries need. In fact, like the Thirst Project, the first time a community has an interaction with the Thirst Project, it is not me or someone from the US. It's not some like random white guy. It is someone from within that country who we have full-time staff who really lead the efforts on the ground in their own countries, who make the work that we do possible. And they will go interface with a prospective community and say, hey, here's who we are, here's what we do. Do you want this? And if so, then it begins a dialogue about what needs to happen for each community to play together. And so, all that to say, when we say take like donors into the field, or people do actually travel, it's not like volunteerism. It's not like, to show off like the exotic people in rural countries or communities. It really is to sort of close that gap for donors. And so all that to say, I got to have a really cool experience just personally with my mom and my family going into the field to see the work that we were doing. And I remember we were in a community in Eswatini, just above South Africa. and we were celebrating the completion of a water project with the community. And this was at a time, I know there's still sort of a historic drought looming this year for much of the continent. But at the time, I mean, there was the worst drought the country and continent had seen in recorded history. And so it was pretty tragic. I mean, in a matter of a few months, not a few, but like 6 to 9 months, we had seen like thousands, 30, 40,000 head of cattle die. And that's relevant, you know, in the human space because A, like that is people's wealth and livelihood, but also B, it was representative of like the struggle for water, not just for animals, but for humans. And so we were celebrating the opening of this water project, and 2 of the women in this community said, hey, would you like to see where we used to get water? And so my mom and some of my friends and I, we like followed these 2 women on about a half mile, not quite 3/4 mile trek through the woods from the center of this community. And it's hot. It's like 108 degrees. We're sweating. We're going through this like pretty, you know, rough walk to get to this water source. And we walk downhill into this, what was at the time, dry riverbed, where, I mean, like, it's not an exaggeration. There were 2 like dead cattle, like in this riverbed, which again, from a disease perspective, if you have like decomposing bodies in the watershed from a surface water source that your community is relying on, like it's horrendous. And so she, you know, this woman shows us and she like starts like digging in the sand to show like, yeah, we would dig down until we hit water. And like, this is where we got water from. Wow. And one of the women that had walked with us there to show us this had, you know, a baby, her daughter tied to her back. And, you know, the daughter was a few months old and super adorable. And the woman starts telling us the story of, yeah, this is where I used to go every day to get water. I literally went into labor with this baby here. And my friend who was with us, she's like, had to like help me get back to the community to give birth. And she's telling us this story. And it's like, again, as much work as we have done in this space, like I can't imagine making that trek every day to get water, much less while pregnant, much less, you know, in all these different conditions. And she finishes the story and she says, you know, but knowing that like she's never going to have to do that and like know what that's like means everything. And so it's just like, that's just like one of literally tens of thousands of stories of the impact that will forever change the trajectory of those communities and those people's lives. So it's hard to pinpoint, you know, just like one thing that's the most rewarding. Even, you know, even not counting the work with water, right? We work with an army of young people, several 100,000 high school and college students who are innovative and selfless and generous, who lead awareness campaigns and fundraising initiatives, again, who have really been a huge part in helping us make this work possible. And on that side of the coin, like we see students go from being shy, not confident in communicating, to finding inspiration and passion around this issue and suddenly standing on stage in front of a couple hundred of their peers in high school, giving speeches about this issue, trying to get their school to do a fundraiser or raise awareness around the issue and make an impact. And I mean, I've got emails or letters from students, some of whom I've never met before, who quite literally have said like, thank you for starting Thirst Project. If it wasn't for Thirst Project, I don't know what the highlight of my senior year would have been. Wow. And so it's like, it's transformational things like that, you know, there's definitely no short. I'm very aware and like, don't take for granted that like I get to do work that gives a lot of meaning, which is great.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. Yeah. I remember whenever you were telling us about everything, like you kind of went through what you've seen and like what you've heard, and you were talking about how like we're gonna see the end of the water crisis in our lifetime, which like I remember telling my parents after you came, and I was like, that's just incredible that we're gonna get to see that. Which like in that same kind of area, like how can we, like everyone, kind of take the steps to help in the water crisis? Like, is there? I know that you mentioned that y'all are doing like a walk to raise awareness. Is that part of it, or like are there other steps that we can take?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So, you know, obviously people, I think, always naturally want things that they can do to make an impact that doesn't just look like donating or buying a strap or a product, right? And there is a tremendous amount of value and power in raising awareness about issues like this. I mean, what we know for sure is like, there was a time when I didn't know about the water crisis, right? And then that conversation with my friend changed the trajectory of certainly my life. And, you know, like, who knows if like Thirst Project wouldn't exist because of that. And so that conversation that is incredibly catalytic. And so I would encourage y'all watching at home, like, don't underestimate the power of your voice, whether it's in sharing something on socials, whether it's in having a meaningful, like one-to-one conversation, or organizing something that, again, raises the profile of an issue like this, like a walk, right?
Yeah.
We on World Water Day all over the country, we have students and old people who are, participating in walks that have been organized all over the world. We have sort of two flagship walks, one happening in London and one happening in LA, where basically we're encouraging people to show up. If they want, they can bring jerry cans or similar like gas cans, which is what people in the developing world use to collect water. And we are just going to walk in solidarity with the people who still have to walk very long distances to dirty water sources to collect water. And it'll be a really powerful visual representation in these cities all over the country and all over the world, of ways we can hopefully use these as catalysts to begin conversations with people. And again, who knows who those conversations may be with or lead to. If it leads to someone who, becomes a super generous donor or funds a whole water project, or who starts their own initiative like this that makes really significant impact.
Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, I am hoping that many people will kind of feel inspired to take part in that walk, because I mean, I know that whenever I heard about it, I was like, I feel like we should organize one here, just because that would yeah, we should. We can. Yeah, I think that's really awesome. I'm glad that the partnership started, because it's opened my eyes for sure, and I know that in our office, like, it has really opened the eyes of other people here, and I can't imagine what impact it's making in the Zox community, as well as like bringing people's attention to what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. I mean, like I said, we talk a lot about impact and measuring impact, at both of the organizations that I'm working with now. And, I think voice and awareness is such an interesting thing. I think a lot of times people, because it's maybe harder to measure, people tend to doubt the impact of it than, dollars raised or project built or that kind of stuff. And yet again, I say, like, look, there was a point in time, whether, your issue is the water crisis, which if it's not, that's okay. It's the thing I care about. But like, there was a point in time where whatever it is that you care about, whether that is climate, whether it's conflict and what's happening in Ukraine, or racial justice, or any number of issues that are really important and meaningful, there was a time when you didn't know about that. And whatever that moment was, when someone introduced you to that, whether it was through a social post, whether it was through a news story or a one-to-one conversation, that act of that person using their voice to have that conversation with you was catalytic. And who knows then what you choose to go do with that on the other side of it, whether it is, again, raising awareness to someone else, whether that's, you doing a fundraiser, you giving money yourself, you volunteering your time. But I mean, I think there's tremendous power in that. And we really encourage people, like, not to underestimate that.
Yeah. Well said. That was very well said.
Yeah, that's really good. So since a portion of every sale that we have through the Zox website goes towards the Thirst Project, it's with like basically great honor that our community has been so amazing in helping us out with this. Can you give the community a little bit of insight into like what their donations have helped accomplish with the Thirst Project?
Yeah. So specifically just with the Thirst Project partnership and Zox over the last several years, you guys have given about $500,000 in funding that's been used in a few different areas. But we've completed over 40 different hand pump borehole wells or spring protection systems in individual villages. So 40 different communities with about 500 people in each community who have safe water, sanitation, and hygiene literally for the rest of their lives. So that's about 20,500 people who have access to safe, clean drinking water for the rest of their lives. Not counting, and a lot of people don't necessarily know this, but when COVID first struck early in 2020, we were able to earmark and use a portion of you guys' funds as well to our COVID response in those communities. Because again, the communities or villages that we work with are typically very rural, and there are almost no hospitals in those areas, sometimes health clinics, but access to things like ventilators or robust like franchise public health systems are really not there. And so one of the biggest fears when COVID first struck was man, we work with the most vulnerable communities. How are we going to make sure that those people are protected? And so it was, again, a super big honor that we were actually asked by the government of Eswatini, which is where the bulk of our work is. We were asked by them to play a pretty lead role in architecting the response to COVID, specifically in the water and sanitation sector. And so they identified the 100 most vulnerable villages or communities to COVID, and we were able to mobilize and build 100 different hand washing stations, which isn't just like one sink. They were like pretty large systems with multiple faucets, and distribute hygiene kits with soap and sanitizer, as well as to do pretty robust training on sanitation and hygiene. Again, like, how can you fight COVID if you can't wash your hands?
Yeah.
And so, so for us, it was super exciting to be able to do that work as well. I think in a year when, things were just incredibly painful and difficult, that was a really big sort of bright spot. And so, the impact that the Zox community has made, in funding those projects is truly remarkable.
That's so awesome to hear.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the exact same thing that we were saying earlier. It's like when you came and talked to us and kind of like let us know what this partnership has done. It's really cool to see that. I saw some of the documents that are actually on the website that you guys have available to like see what the communities are and what the impacts have been. That is incredible too, and I love how that's just public knowledge. Yeah. It's really, really cool.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, like I said, we definitely don't take it for granted. So.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see what the future of our partnership holds as well, because if that's the impact we've made so far, I can't wait to see what comes in like the upcoming years. That's gonna be awesome.
Oh yeah, that's why this World Water Day is so important.
Yeah.
So
bringing attention.
Yeah. I know we're working on some really fun, exciting new things as well that are making even more impact, honestly. So I mean it when I say the work we do just doesn't happen without tremendous support, and we're super grateful for it.
Yeah.
Of course. Well, thank you so much, Seth. We're pretty much at time here, about 30 minutes. So I just wanted to thank you so much for coming on and just giving us all a little bit more insight into everything that the Thirst Project does. Not just for us as a community, but for literally everybody in the world.
Yeah.
It's pretty incredible. You guys have impacted so many lives. Mm-hmm. So it's really cool to have you on here and kind of talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, thank you all so much. And if we can ever help, we want to be great partners. So let us know what we can do. But I'm excited to keep on making impact together.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so definitely hang out after we end the podcast here. But for everybody watching, thank you so much. You can find the podcast. This one will be actually out for everybody, right?
Yes.
Yeah, we're going to release this one for everyone. And then I'll have links down below where you can go and click on the Thirst Project's, their website, their Instagram page, and get kind of caught up with all the news there. Seth, is there anything you wanted to plug really quickly before we end?
Yeah, like I said, please visit thirstproject.org or check out any of the social handles at Thirst Project for information on World Water Day walks, where you can maybe join, or if you're compelled, you want to start your own, please organize a group, use that opportunity. World Water Day is sort of the day where we as the global community stop to recognize both where we are at with the need for safe water, as well as celebrate the progress that's been made. So let's, make the most of that opportunity to really raise the profile of the issue and keep closing that gap. I know we talked about it when I came to visit, but people listening or watching may not know, I believe it when I say we will be the generation to push the water crisis into the history books, not just in our lifetimes, really in the next probably 15 years or less. And so it's really exciting to see how that gap keeps closing. But, for those of you that want to give $25 one time, gives one person safe water for life, not once a month or once a year, once, which is incredible. So yeah, thank you so much. Use your voice, give, and have a great World Water Day.
Cool.
Awesome.
Thank you guys. Have a good one.
Bye.